Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday it is now. Hopefully you did okay with yesterday's stuff. We talked about phenotype yesterday. We're going to focus on genotype today. And then we'll have a Friday quiz tomorrow. It's going to be pretty simple though. Don't get nervous about it. I'll explain more tomorrow, but it's not going to be bad. It'll just be over what we've talked about this week, which honestly hasn't been that much. We've only covered a couple new topics, so it'll be a relatively small quiz, so don't worry about that. We're going to talk genotype today. So remember, phenotype is your physical traits, phenotype physical. You made that list of your physical traits compared to blood relatives' physical traits yesterday. And then we're going to talk about how that all works today. And this is really the beginning of getting into Punnett squares. So I mentioned Punnett squares yesterday. We're not going to get to them until next week. But this stuff, you need to have this to be able to work a Punnett square. So this stuff is really important. Now, remember, genotype is your particular genes that make you have a certain physical trait. So genotype, phenotype, very related. Your genotype determines your phenotype. If you get what I'm saying, that this specific genes that you have determines the physical traits that you have as well. So what we've got here is a couple pairs of chromosomes. Now you see blue is the paternal copy. Paternal refers to father or dad, and then maternal in the purple refers to your mom. So those are just good things to know. For some reason, we use those terms in society a lot. We'll say something's paternal or maternal, and now you know paternal being father and maternal being mother. So on this first pair here, we're going to look at eyes and hair color first. Now, you're going to notice the letters right away, okay? This is going back to a word that we touched on Tuesday, and this is alleles, okay? So all of these letters represent alleles, the B's and the T's, okay? Now, an allele is just a different gene. It's all the different genes that you can get from when half DNA from mom, half DNA from dad combine, okay? Now, the first one we're going to talk about here is eye color. So I'm going to take note of this down here. So eye color, if I asked you to describe the genotype of this person for eye color, this is all you would do. You would say eye color, genotype. It's big B and it's little b, not with an I, okay? So let me make this a little bit bigger. The genotype is, you're literally going to write it as the letters, okay? It's that simple. Remember, these are alleles. You've got a big B, you've got a little b. Those are your two alleles, okay? And that is for eye color. Now, you may have to do this on some questions. You may not. You might have to say what each of these alleles represents. So down here, a big B allele equals, we're talking about eye color, brown eyes, okay? A little b allele in eye color is blue eyes. Let me make that capital. Oh, it made it, or did I make it? We want little b. There we go. Okay, so this is actually true. In humans, brown eyes is a dominant trait. That's why we write it as the big B. And then blue eyes is a recessive trait, and that's why we write it as the little b. Now, we talked about dominant recessive a little bit on Tuesday as well. Here's how this works, and I think I said this on Tuesday. If you go back to your vocab, it's in there. If you have a single dominant allele, okay, for any particular trait, then your phenotype is going to be whatever that dominant allele represents. So in this case, this person, they got one trait for eye color from mom. They got one trait for eye color from dad. One of them was the dominant trait. So remember, that recessive trait, it doesn't matter. It's there. They're carrying that trait, but you don't see that in their phenotype, okay? Hopefully this makes sense. I know it's a little bit strange, some new terminology here. So in other words, this person, if I asked you what's their phenotype, and I'll do that down here, not phenotype. I'm struggling with my typing today. So if I asked you what's their phenotype, we would just say this person has brown eyes. Okay. Now, they have the blue-eyed trait still, but this person is going to appear to us that their phenotype is going to be brown eyes, okay? So there's many different ways you can have brown eyes. It's not just this way. You could also have it this way. I shouldn't say many different ways. There's at least one more, right? If your if your genotype was two big B's, okay, if you got a dominant from mom and a dominant from dad, you would still have brown eyes, okay? You would just have two dominant traits, and that's what's going to appear in your phenotype anyway, whatever that dominant trait is, okay? So if you had big B, little b, or big B, you would still have brown eyes. But this person in particular here, they have big B, little b, so we're going to keep it as so. Okay, hopefully this makes sense so far. It does get a little bit trickier. Now, let's see. I don't want to have to scroll too much. I'll go ahead and wipe this out. Let's do hair color next. So you see this person already has the two little b's, okay? We don't know what those mean yet, but we can already get an indication of what's going on here. So genotype for hair color. Hopefully you should know this by now. I feel like Dora the Explorer. Like I can hear you saying the right answer, but I just have to stand here and go like this and pretend like I have no idea what's going on. So this person's hair color, they've got a little b genotype. Okay. Now, again, we don't know what those mean. In humans, brown hair is dominant. Blonde or light colored hair is recessive. So in this case, sorry, that should be little b for hair color. These two is what I'm referring to right here. So in this case, this person's got two little letters. They've got two recessive alleles, okay? Now, if you remember in your notes, and this is kind of tricky, you have to go back to Tuesday, we said that in order for a recessive allele to appear in your phenotype, you have to have two of them, okay? So in order for you to have blonde hair or to have lighter colored hair, you would have to get a blonde hair trait from mom and a blonde hair trait from dad, okay? So this person's phenotype is going to be what? And just like Dora, I can hear you saying blonde hair, okay? If this person, if they had any dominant trait in there, if they had a single big B, that's what it's doing. It keeps changing it to big B, or big B, little b. Ha, there, I figured it out. So if this person had a single big B, if they got one from mom or if they got one from dad, then they would have brown hair, okay? It would be just like our first example with the eye color. But in order for them to have blonde hair, they would have to have two little b's, okay? That's recessive. That's the difference between recessive and dominant. In dominant, you just need one. You can have one or two, and you'll look like whatever the dominant trait is. In order to get the recessive, you have to have the two. You cannot just have one little b, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, we're going to get a little bit gross here, and we're going to talk about toes or fingers, either way. A little bit weird. So, fun fact, you might not know this, the number of your fingers, it's inherited, right? You know your body knows to make 10 of them, except that's not 100% true. In fact, in humans, polydactyl, it's what it's called. That means you've got more than just 5 on each side. That is actually a dominant trait, okay? So if you look at the number of fingers here on the right, this person, do they have one dominant? Do they have two dominant? Do they have no dominant? That's the first thing we need to look at. Their genotype is going to be big T. Okay. Now, I just told you that's dominant. Polydactyl, having more than 5 fingers per hand, is actually a dominant trait. So if you were to get one big T, guess what? You're going to have 6 fingers on one hand. Okay. So this person actually has 2. Now that doesn't make a difference, right? If I have one dominant or if I have 2 dominant, it's the same thing. I'm not going to have 12 all of a sudden because on one hand, you're not going to get more because you have more dominant traits. Okay. If you have just one dominant trait, you've got whatever that trait is. Okay. Hopefully I explained that a little bit funky, but hopefully that makes sense. So in this case, this person's phenotype is going to be 6 fingers, not per hand. Okay. So they've got big T, the dominant trait shows up. The dominant trait is polydactyl. Kind of sounds like pterodactyl, not the same thing. So they're going to have 6 fingers per hand. Now, that means most of us, the vast majority of people in the world, we have to have that genotype right there, okay? Because if we were to have one of the big T's, then we're going to be a bunch of 6-fingered per hand people, okay? Does that make sense? A little bit weird, a little bit funky, but that's the difference between dominant and recessive alleles, okay? We're going to talk about something new. We got to add some terminology into your notes. I'm going to do it right here, but please add these into the note, not the notes, sorry, the vocab sheet that we didn't talk about beforehand. So I want you to add 2 terms in. You can add them in. Let me pull it up real quick and see. Just add them in after recessive and dominant, okay? Add these in after recessive and dominant. So the first one that we're going to add in here is a really fun word to spell, homozygous, okay? This one is going to show up in biology next year as well, or in 2 years whenever you end up taking biology. Now, if we remember the prefix homo, we talked about this, I forget when, it was a while ago. That means same, okay? So if we're describing genotypes, if you see the word homozygous, that means that there are 2 of the same type of allele, okay? So anytime you see homozygous, that means there's 2 of the same. They're the exact same, okay? I think prefix homo meaning same, alleles, you've got 2 of the same alleles. Now, what this looks like, your example would be, you either have, let's stick with fingers here, 2 big T's or 2 little T's. There we go, okay? So homozygous, 2 of the same type of allele, meaning you either have 2 dominant or 2 recessive, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, the other word I want you to add in here is heterozygous. And the prefix hetero meaning different. So guess what this means? You have 2 different types of alleles, okay? Your example of this would be really simple, big T, little t, okay? Now, you notice I'm always putting the big letter first. That's typically how it's done. Can you necessarily do it the opposite way? Yeah, but it's the way we do it in genetics, so get used to this. If you have a big letter, if you have a capital letter, it's always going to be first. Yeah, we'll go with that. So heterozygous, you're going to have 2 different. So anytime you've got a big and little letter, you know that's heterozygous. You've got 2 different alleles. And then homozygous, you've got 2 of the same, whether it's 2 dominant or 2 recessive. So you may see this. Let me add this in just so you don't get confused if you see it. You may see it written as homozygous dominant or recessive, okay? So in a sentence, it might say, this mouse is homozygous dominant for brown fur. What that tells you is they're going to be 2 big letters, okay? Homozygous dominant, 2 of the same, 2 dominant, okay? I hope that makes sense. I keep saying, does that make sense? Again, like you can answer back to me, but hopefully it does. Let me know if it doesn't. Shoot me an email and I'll help you out with this a little bit more. I know it's a little bit new. It's foreign stuff. I don't think you guys talk about this at any previous grade level. So 2 really important words to know. Homozygous, it can be dominant or recessive, either 2 big T's, 2 little t's. It's not always going to be t's. And then heterozygous, you've got 2 different types of alleles, okay? We're going to switch gears here. Go ahead and get your textbook ready. We're going to go to 333 because we got to talk about something that makes this more complicated. Of course, there's always another step that makes it more complicated. But we're going to stop this segment for now. Get your textbook, go to 333, and I'll see you in a second.